Can chat. Good morning or afternoon, and welcome to a very special LinkedIn Live event sponsored by Duke Corporate Education, Disrupting the Apparel Industry, with our special guest, Matthew Wallace, who's the co-founder of a startup called DXM, which you'll hear a little bit more about in the show. Basically, the Agile Dashboard is about providing foresight for leaders. And we do one-on-one interviews with senior leaders to help them bring the latest global thinking to the conversation, to talk about what they're learning in their organizations, how they're looking at the future and opportunities, and how they're moving their organizations forward and pivoting to take advantage of those opportunities. So the format for our show is today we'll go for about 45 minutes. We're going to do a one-on-one. I'll introduce Matthew in just a second. My name is Joe Perfetti. I'm an innovation fellow with Duke Corporate Education, and I am the host of the show. And Matthew and I will start the conversation. You are welcome as part of our audience to ask questions. So feel free to enter them into the chat on either YouTube Live if you're watching there or on LinkedIn Live. And we're happy to address those questions. And then the final 15 minutes, we have two expert panelists that'll be joining us for a roundtable conversation. We have Vishal Patel, who is a global managing director here at Duke Corporate Education. And we have Scott Coher, who is a vice dean at the Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine. So they'll be joining us as part of the panel in a few minutes. So thanks, Scott and Vishal. But as we get started, my guest today is Matthew Wallace. So welcome, Matthew.
Thank you, Joe. Good to be here.
It is, and very good to have you here because I've known you for several years. Matthew is a former executive vice president of the supply chain at a company called PVH before he left to do this startup, which we're going to talk a little bit about in the show. But more importantly, Matthew's worked at PVH. He's worked at Walmart, has 30 years of retail experience. Not only is he leading disruption, but he understands the disruption that's happening in the apparel industry, and he's going to be discussing that with us today. So again, welcome to the show, and I want to go ahead and dive right in. So in our conversations over time, Matthew, you've talked about, and we're going to start out with a conversation of the industry, but you've talked about how the apparel industry is moving from sort of apparel 1.0 or retail 1.0 to retail 4.0. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, first, Joe, I want to thank Duke Corporate Education, yourself and your team for having me. I think it's a topic that is not only something that's near and dear to me, but I think the whole industry and world that's in retail is seeing this disruption. And when we talk about industry 1.0 to 4.0, you hear a lot about that in the technology space, the auto space, the aerospace industry. And what you don't hear about is in other industries, very specifically the apparel industry. I've been fortunate enough to be a third generation in the apparel industry, and my grandfather and then father had factories here in the United States, in New Jersey. And I could tell you from a recent trip down to Alabama to a machine company that you can use the same 6 or 7 core machines to set up a factory in Southeast Asia or Africa today to manufacture apparel than you could back in the late 1950s or early 1960s. So what I mean by it is yeah, there are industrial revolutions taking place. There is equipment that has evolved in certain areas, in certain spaces, in washing and in digital printing and things like that. But as a whole, 90+% of the industry has just continued to move from country to country that has essentially lower cost labor and is using the same type of processes and equipment that it did 40 years ago.
Well, and it seems like we still have the same problems we've had over the last several decades. We have too much inventory, takes too long to respond, and particularly even in the COVID world. We were seeing disruption in retail even before with all the stores closing down. Now it seems to happen at an accelerated pace.
Yeah, so I think inventory has always been a problem, and it's not about too much or too little inventory. It's about the right inventory and the wrong inventory at the right time or the wrong time, right? When you go into a store and you're there to buy something specifically, if they don't have your color or size that you're looking for, they've just lost the customer potentially because you could go somewhere else. Now, I don't think the industry at all has solved that problem. In fact, we're still overproducing as an industry, over 20% of what we're making right now. And some organizations, by the way, have done a much better job, Joe, as you referenced on the time space. You know, everybody's heard about companies like Zara referencing about how fast their value chain has come and how much better they do, by the way, on markdowns and selling out of their product at a higher price or a higher value. But as a whole, we just haven't solved that problem, and the lead times continue to be too long. And a lot of that has to do with we don't really have the industry in a localized fashion yet. It's still being significantly imported, whether it be to the US or other countries.
So when we talk about retail 4.0, so we're kind of jumping into the future, what are some of the things that are driving the changes that are happening right now and disrupting the business that hadn't happened before?
Yeah, so there's several key trends shaping what we'd say the environment, right? So geopolitical and trade is shaping the environment, if you will. And you see the slide that's up right now, and we'll get to that. I would say that robotics and artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, sustainability is shaping the industry. And then the on-demand, the customization, the personalization, the co-creation, the generations are shaping the industry. So ultimately, it's the consumer, right? The shift of the consumer is really shaping the industry as you look at the younger consumer that has a lot of disposable income to spend today, Joe. But as far as the 4.0, we need to become more automated. We need to connect things, and we need to drive a true consumer-centric value chain all the way through the retail model. And it doesn't matter whether it's online, on your phone, in a store, et cetera.
So I assume technology is part of this, because even if we look at the U.S. apparel market, it's been devastated over the last couple of decades. Employment's gone from 900,000 back in 1990 to about 110,000 people today. And I assume that part of it is people leaving for the lower cost, but part of it's also technology. And I assume technology is starting to disrupt at a faster rate.
It is. And there's a myth out there, Joe, and unfortunately, I don't have the exact statistic, but the World Economic Forum about a year and a half ago, I think it was 2018, did a study about the growth of robotics. And there's that myth that robotics will replace people. And it actually went the other way, where I believe there was somewhere between a 6 or 8% increase in employment. The type of jobs, though, right, are different, because the material handling and things like that are now more easily done by the robotics. And then the technology is able to drive things that perhaps people were doing on Excel or manually. So there's a lot out there right now that can replace what was being done before. And there's a lot of organizations out there, essentially, that have figured out how to do it. The apparel industry isn't quite there yet, right? Right now, we're at about, we're coming up to about 65%. And it really is product dependent. There's some products right now that could be done 100% with no people. A 3D knitted sweater can be done 100% right now with no people, but you're not there in a pair of denim, not quite yet.
Well, one of the other things you said that's rapidly changing as well is this notion of building a sustainability model, because companies like Zara have been criticized for actually creating too much clothing that's being wasted. And that's probably an important trend going forward as well.
Yeah, well, the industry, as I mentioned before, Joe, just creates, and the last statistic I had was 21%. It was over 20% that is literally waste. It just comes out of the system if you think about that. And if you as a consumer would think about anything, whether it be food, and look, we waste a lot of food in developed countries also, yet there's all these people that don't have access to that food. But yeah, technology is playing a role, and that hasn't been solved, which really leads to, we have to come at this differently, right? We have to look at the business model in a different way. We have to utilize technology. There are other industries that have evolved. From when Henry Ford started the assembly line, the auto industry is not making or selling cars the same way that it did. The apparel industry as a whole still is.
So what needs to change in your mind about the business model?
I think there's a lot of things that need to change, but I'd say there's three or four key things. One, I think the key performance indicators of what people are measured on at these companies, at these retailers is really important. If you're measured on inventory having too much or too little, it doesn't matter whether it's right or it's wrong, right? You just want to have the right amount. that doesn't mean it's consumer centric. We need to shift our mindset. And again, give credit to companies that have really done a good job in this, but have not shifted. The industry hasn't shifted. We have to become truly consumer centric. And if we don't think the Gen Z and the generation behind that, which will be termed Gen A, and I term it Gen E, Gen everything, they're going to want sustainability. They're going to want speed. They're going to want value. They're going to want to co-create. They're going to want their influencer. They're going to want it on social media. We have to change the model as a whole. We have to use technology, learn from other industries, use the advanced manufacturing. And I think most of all, we need it in a localized platform. We need it to bring back the manufacturing to where the consumer is consuming the product. We can't wait 30 days for a vessel or put it on an airplane anymore that's 10 times less sustainable.
Well, and I also think that, people want personalization. People want customization. We get in so many other industries. Why can't we have that in clothing?
Yeah, you can personalize your Mini Cooper, no problem right now. You can build your own car. Just go to any website, right? Build your, it doesn't matter whether it's a Mini Cooper or it's a Ford or it's a Tesla, right? You can do that. In clothing, we tell you that we can monogram that for you, right? And I do think that personalization, customization, and also co-creation, nobody wants to necessarily make the product all themselves, but they love to be part of it. They love to understand that there's an emotional attachment to it. And that is especially true with the two younger generations that are out there, the Gen Z and the millennials. And if we don't think that those behaviors, those consumer behaviors are shifting things in this industry, we are just blind to it.
So give me your vision for how DXM is approaching this with a new business model. What's your thought?
So as you said, Joe, DXM is a startup. So coming out of the corporate world for the last many years, well over a decade. And I want to give a shout out to my previous employer who gave us tremendous support. And they had the vision to kind of while I worked there, let me and others at the corporation, right, help develop this model. And what's a little bit different about it is localized, Joe, right? If we have the consumer in the United States, we want the manufacturing and the technology to be in the United States. If it would be in Europe, we'd want that in Europe. And of course, Europe's a big place, so you'd have to make sure to serve and put the locations in the right place. But what's different about DXM is it's going to be sustainable in its practices. It's an open platform, right? It's a business-to-business model. We're not trying to brand something here, if we will. We're trying to provide a service to brands, to businesses, to influencers, to new companies that are starting up. And we're doing it in a very different way. We're doing it with an ecosystem of best-in-class partners. Fortunately, I'm not able to mention any of those partners right now, but they consist of best-in-class technology companies from around the world. They consist of advanced manufacturing organizations from around the world. And when I say around the world, I'm talking about countries like Thailand, countries like Israel, Spain, France, the United States, Germany. And we've brought together at this point great brands, great manufacturers from around the world, from India, from Sri Lanka, from Indonesia, other locations around the world. And we've brought them together into an ecosystem that we don't know everything. We can't figure everything out. And what we need to do is not be tied to one particular way of doing things. And the great thing about having a plethora of organizations, and there's more than 15 in that ecosystem, we get such great insight and learnings from other things that have been done. And that is a bit, I'd say, of the secret sauce. It's about that ecosystem.
So from what I understand, the general idea is you're going to be a B2B platform that's going to basically co-create on an on-demand basis clothing. So you get custom clothing delivered to you in a matter of days rather than weeks to your size at a reasonable cost. And it's a platform kind of like Amazon Web Services where I can be a individual who's an influencer, or I can be a large organization. It's a brand. I can plug into your platform and take advantage of that custom infrastructure. Isn't that the idea?
Yeah, that is the idea. Thanks for the compliment on the Amazon piece. It should only happen that we could do as well as Amazon Web Services has done. But yeah, Joe, that is the concept. Yeah, the other thing, it's not just about customization, co-creation, and personalization, which we can do it at a unit of one for all of those organizations and people you just mentioned. It's also about providing two other things, Joe. And we talked about inventory, so I'll go back to it quite a bit. Imagine that instead of somebody deciding what color, what print, right, what embroidery that goes on a shirt or a pant or whatnot, or what belt loop or style, of course, brands are going to want to stay brand centric, which they should, of course, always, right? That's their DNA. Imagine instead of have to order 20,000 of those or 10 or 200, and you do it in 8 colors or 6 prints, if you will, or embroideries, you can actually use DXM to do 20 colors, 20 prints at 200 each, put it on your website, put it into a test store, figure out the 8 that don't work, the 2 that work fairly well, and the 6 that are perhaps a home run. And then what we can do through the platform is we can get you back into those units in a larger way with the 10 or 20,000 units in the next 2 weeks versus having to order something essentially 6 months in advance. That is consumer centric because the consumer online or in the store is voting on what it is that they're reacting to, the color, the print, etc. That eliminates inventory, markdown, waste, and will drive your top line profitable sales.
Yep. And like I said, just like Amazon completely disrupted the computer industry by having on-demand computing, Cisco, who was on the show on our last show, talked about how hardware as a service is taking over because I don't want to buy routers. I just want to buy access to connectivity. You're just buying access to clothing. The other key thing is the consumer shift because it's not the companies trying to figure out, oh, what do these Gen Zs want? Let me try and pick the colors, the styles. You're actually letting the Gen Zs do it themselves.
You are, and I would say that, and look, I know some people probably listening are saying, well, what about me? Well, I'm not a Gen Z, I'm not a millennial, and I don't think you are either, Joe. But
no, not anymore.
Yeah. So and I see the banner coming up. I mean, think about what I said earlier. That's a lot of supplemental income or buying power that they have, and it's only growing. But yeah, we think that these two generations, very specifically the Gen Z and the next one, want a say. They have an opinion. And look, you can just look at what's happening just in general around the world. And I don't want to get political at all, but the activism is coming from, right, these younger generations. They really are. And that's nothing against my generation or yours, Joe, but they have a loud voice and they want it to be heard. And we think that shift just continues to play through in the retail space.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is if I am one of those activists, millennials, I'm an influencer on Instagram or something, I can't go to a traditional brand. It's not like I can go to Polo Ralph Lauren and say, I want to start a clothing brand. Where do I even go to do this? And it seems like in a way that YouTube created the power to the individual to give them all the tools to do video production on a global scale individually. Your vision tries to do that with the consumers as well, right? In a way?
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think that the market that's most captured and most, I'd say, recognized and is really translated into sales has been the cosmetic space, right, if you will, right? Companies have really, the influence on YouTube and Instagram and how to put your makeup on and coming out. People like influencers like Jeffree Star, who sell out of their products in not days or weeks, but how about seconds and minutes? It's not even hours, right? The website crashes in the first 2-3 minutes when Jeffree Star puts out a new product, if you will. And you think about that, it's like, how do I sell a product in the apparel industry that sells out that fast? By the way, at full price, right? How do I do that? And I think that's, I think there's something to it. And I think you can't manufacture the product 8,000 miles away, 6,000 miles away, et cetera. You need to listen to the consumer and you need to react very quickly to them.
Now, the closest I've seen in the real world to something like this is Amazon has been testing something called the drop. Are you familiar with that? And how is your vision of that same or similar or different than what Amazon's doing?
Yeah, so I am familiar. I get their text once a week, I think it is, on the drop or whatnot. Actually, I bought a product through it for my wife. I just wanted to test it. Actually worked pretty well, to be quite frank with you. I don't think they manufactured the product. I think they had the inventory, to be quite frank with you, Joe. And I don't know that for a fact. I'm just giving you my opinion. I think the difference is, one, I think it's the right idea, to be quite frank with you. I think it's the right time to do it. I think the difference is this is on-demand manufacturing, right? This is being able to test and learn, if you will. So I think there's slight differences for sure between them, but kudos to them. And again, I think we'll bring this up, I think, a little later in the conversation. It's just an amazing organization that continues to just try things, learn from them, and move on. And it's a principle we're certainly going to look at continuing at DXM.
So if you're going to do on demand, there's a couple of problems I think need to be solved. It's great to talk about 4.0 in theory, but so one of the problems is, all right, I want to basically link to multiple manufacturers. So basically, I would assume that somebody like an influencer could do this, but somebody like a Ralph Lauren, somebody like a Calvin Klein, Tommy, whoever, they can all plug into the platform and use the platform to do custom clothing. Right? Is that the idea?
That is the idea. Yep.
Okay. So, but I just want to basically say, but my challenge here is, how do you solve for fit? Because if I have a problem with Calvin Klein because they're really tight, and I like loose fitting clothes. So the same size at a Calvin versus a Ralph Lauren, to me, it's not the same size. And if you're building custom clothes, you're going to get a lot of returns, aren't you?
Yeah, so Joe, I think you give a great point, right? So you and I are on video and people can see us, but we wear our clothes differently, right? You like to wear them the way you want to wear them. I like to wear them the way I want to wear them. It's not about our measurements, right? So there's a little bit, I think, I think there's been a little bit of an overplay around fit and measurements, right? If you will. It's more about, how does the consumer actually like to wear the product despite their measurements? And the fit problem has been a problem and been trying to be solved for over 20 years now, if you will. And you can go into certain stores right now. I personally go into one particular store, won't mention it, and I have to wear 3 different sizes of pants in the same store because they call it something different, right? And I'm not talking about slim fit versus other. So to get to that, Joe, we have brought together 5 different technology companies, right? Some from the United States, some from South America, some from Asia, that will help us through technology, right, solve that problem. And we don't necessarily need your measurement, right, to provide you the clothing that will fit you the way it wants you to, the way you want it to fit, excuse me. And it's driven all by AI and ML. And you may say, oh, fancy acronyms, AI and ML. We've done a couple of proof of concepts. The first one wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be. The second one was more successful. And as we continue to iterate and learn, we feel very strongly that these organizations have the secret sauce on the technology side to solve that problem to a very, very high degree. Won't be perfect, because perfect doesn't exist.
But the advantage to you would be, it would seem that if you have me, Joe's record, which you're figuring out a technology you iterate, then you could take that to any brand and solve a lot of inventory problems with the co-creation.
We can, Joe, and that's part of it. So again, I'll just very generically, if you buy size small in brand A, once you buy that through the business-to-business platform on brand A and they're using the DXM technology, we will have a digital ID, right, of how you bought it. And hopefully we will have some type of social media or some type of feedback from you that, yep, it was great, loved it, etc. And what we'll do is we'll share that information back with the brand when you go back on the brand B site and go to buy a small and say, we'll flag brand B and say, they might want to buy an extra small, or they might want to buy a medium, right? The intelligence that we'll have, right, will be shared back with the brand accordingly. So you don't buy that medium and you need an extra small, if you will, or vice versa.
Yeah, no, that sounds very powerful, because what's interesting is I heard in the industry that actually the most successful fit for customization was a company called Men's Warehouse, where basically they actually had the people in the stores who weren't like, the seamstresses, whatever, just sales guys. And when they fit you for like a suit or something, they're like, yeah, just a little looser, a little less. And that was actually more successful than the people that like put the iPhone and scanned the body and tried to actually know what you do. So I like that.
Yeah. So we're actually going to offer a combination of both, Joe, right? We'll take both. We're trying to take as much data and information, but it's called consumer preference. And what we have is a preference model of how is it that you like here on your shoulders, in your sleeve, on your arm, around your belly, around your legs, right? Different parts of your legs. And we're asking you that question. And we're asking you to answer the preference piece, less than what is your collar size or what is your hip size? How many people know their hip size? I know I don't. So,
yeah. But, and by the way, the other closest I've seen recently is I bought an Apple Watch 6, and I know that they're getting really important on customizing and personalizing bands, and people love that. Can you imagine personalizing your entire wardrobe? So I really applaud what you're trying to do. So the other thing that seems to matter here is, this sounds great. How do you do this locally? Because last time I checked, I just showed a stat that said we lost 800,000 jobs in the U.S. and there's no manufacturing in the U.S. How do we actually do this?
So first of all, Joe, we don't have all the answers, right? I don't know anyone who typically does, but we definitely don't have all the answers. We have spent, and again, kudos to my previous employer, the last 2.5 years on this model. And prior to that, my previous employer with other associates had spent multiple years working through how to make this work. You must bring together public, private, government. And that's really what we've done. We've narrowed down locations, talked to both state and local governments, talked to the private partnerships were there, again, through the consortium model, the financial support that we would need, not only from the consortium or the founding members, if you will, but from banks and things like that. People want to support this, not necessarily because it just brings jobs back, right? That's certainly one thing, and that's certainly something you'll hear, you know, on the news and online, on Twitter and whatnot, because people want you to hear that because it's a good subject. Joe, what we figured out is we can drive a higher average unit retail value for a personalized or customized item, right? And if you take a look at something called total cost of ownership versus a gross margin, right? The margin you get when you think you're going into it versus actually what it wound up at the end. Those are very different numbers. So we think we can actually sell the product at a higher price because there are no markdowns. There is no inventory. The consumer's already voting. We have the latest technology helping guide your fit, right? So there are no or very, very limited returns. So we're taking all of those factors out, and those factors cost billions and billions of dollars for retailers around the world.
So I just want to pick a question for the audience here, because somebody else had
Sure.
mentioned when we were talking about co-creation, just looking at the text, that they love the co-creation concept. So, you know, can you answer the question about what brands do you think will be early adopters of something like this?
So look, I would not like to assume anything, but I think there's brands already out there doing it, right? I think brands like Nike and Adidas have done a great job with their footwear and doing some type of co-creation. I mean, Nike, last I checked, had, I believe, over $1 billion business in that personalization, somewhat co-creation piece. Look, I think in the apparel space, that I think that some of the younger brands are going to be absolutely into doing the co-creation. And I believe that some of the brands that are a little more forward-thinking, but might be what some people might look at as a little older in who their consumer is, I think they're willing to try because they know there's shifts coming in the industry. So I'm not looking to avoid your question specifically. I'm just trying to be careful as we're talking to several people right now. So I don't want to bring up any specific names.
I don't want to put you on the spot with naming names,
Yeah.
but maybe we could answer the question this way. You had actually had a slide in terms of how OnDemand would work with the co-creation experience.
Yeah.
Maybe we can put that up and just
Sure.
walk through a use case. How might that work?
Great. Yeah, that would be great.
Background.
The
OnDemand. It starts with Inspire in the upper left. There's a graphic.
Great. Yeah. So I think part of this is where are people inspired from today? Is it on the street? Is it on a bus? Right? Is it through a designer or whatnot, if you will? Where are they inspired from today? Is it on Instagram? Is it on TikTok? right? And then they can go onto their phone, their iPad, their computer, wherever it is, and help basically co-create and bring together that concept and purchase through the business or the brand or the influencer they're using. And then we could take that and use our platform to digitally and advanced manufacture that and deliver that pretty quickly, whether it be small batch or single unit, and do so extremely quickly. It's a new way of working. It's a new thought process, a new culture.
Which, by the way, seems like it would benefit the brands themselves, because I would have taken all that inspiration. I'd have had to wait to go to a design. I'd go to Paris and Tokyo or New York, and then 3 to 6 months later, my product would be on a shelf, and hopefully somebody would bought it before it gets out of season. I wouldn't have to mark it down. Like, that's all being eliminated.
It is. And look, there's some companies doing the whole runway right to the store. A lot of that, though, is being pre-produced, right? They're assuming they sell out. And by the way, kudos to them, because it is a shift. It is more consumer-centric. It is being influenced by the models or the influencers that are there. This, again, is a little different because we're physically manufacturing it on demand. But again, kudos to all of them who shifted from where they were to where they're at.
By the way, Karen D in the chat just mentioned that Levi's as a company is actually doing the customization of jeans. So you can do kind of custom jeans.
Yeah, they can. And I actually own 2 pairs. So I went on their site, I bought them. I picked my wash. I got to pick my color, my label on the back and whatnot. Again, good experience, if you will. So I did buy 2. And I think, Karen, you're right. Great brand, doing a great job.
I want to bring Scott and Vishal into this conversation, but as they do, I just have one other question for you. You also mentioned the word ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Haven't other companies tried to do this before and not been successful? So why do you think you're going to actually be successful where everybody else has kind of had some challenges with this?
So first of all, Joe, I think there are a lot of, first of all, there are small companies and there are companies that manufacture products right here in the U.S., right? All types of products. I would say, again, if you look at it, the scale relative to the size of the industry here in the U.S. is very, very small. As far as others doing it, I would take anything anyone's done that hasn't worked as a great learning. And I think some of those organizations are actually at it their second and third time already, right? Because they are taking those learnings and they're moving on. I think it is very difficult for any single organization, right, to try and do this on their own. I think there's just too much technology that moves too fast. There's too much advanced manufacturing that becomes outdated, right, at this point. And it just is too difficult to do it alone, which is why we, again, it was a pivot for us. We essentially were trying to come at this, if you will, alone and pivoted to this consortium ecosystem model. And we think there's something secret in that sauce that makes it different.
Yeah, no, I guess that's the point, which is the collaborative aspect gets you a lot further than the doing it alone, because we all think we can do that.
Vishal? Yeah, one point, if I could, Joe. What's interesting about the consortium we're in it, there are actually competitors, direct competitors in this consortium together.
How'd you do that? Sorry, I'm curious.
I still don't know yet, but when I find out, I'll let you know.
It's the friend of me approach. Go ahead.
Joe, can I follow up on that one? Yeah, one of the questions that keeps popping into my head, Matthew, is, you know, you're setting up this platform, and it sounds amazing in terms of what's possible, but you got to get the partners right on the front end of it, right? Because if you don't, it's just going to delay you. It's not going to have the impact that you're looking for. Can you talk a little bit more about the selection criteria as you kind of started creating this or curating this network of really important folks that are out there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. October 2nd, tomorrow, will be 2 years from when the first group met in the U.S. together. And we came from all over the world. Of that group, there are multiple companies that are no longer involved, right? And I would say it comes down to really 2 things. One is mindset, right? Very important. Michelle, because look, when people ask me what has been the most difficult thing, it's that, right? How do you decide, right, who to go with? How do you decide? When I say go with, it's not my decision, it's our decision as a group. How do you decide? And it's really mindset. Are the people aligned with it? Is failure okay, right? Is it okay to pivot and try things? right? Is it okay not to just go out and buy the canned system that's out there that you know is going to run a company, appropriately? And I think that was very, very pivotal for us. What was the mindset? So, and I'd say the other thing is willing and able, right? Are you willing? Not just mindset. Are you willing to do it? And then do you actually have the ability to do and play the role that you need to play? And that role could be disruptor. That role could be to challenge everything that's being said out there. And those were really the criteria that we came up with. And Michelle, it's a great question, and it really is. And look, we landed on 6 founding members, and we've been together for quite some time. And it's not all roses. There's thorns in the roses. We have some unbelievable great debates. We do. And that's the beauty of getting things moving forward and further than you would if not.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's one other piece to that one as well that I heard, Matthew, which was like around humility, right? Just to say, wait a second, no matter what we may have achieved up to this point, that doesn't guarantee us future success. And maybe we can actually learn from the others that are out there that are part of that curious mindset that's there. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, some of the people that Joe mentioned that have tried this, and look, you'd say somewhat successfully, some successfully and some less successfully, if you will. We've had conversations with. They've been open to been having conversations. Want to learn everything we can from others, everything we possibly can.
Yeah.
Well, Matthew, I've got to jump into this. I am, well, first of all, congratulations. And second, you can tell by my dress that I'm a well-dressed clothes hound. What I'm wondering as we go through this is, are you going to save me money? I'm a father of 2 daughters and a wife, all of whom are quite fashionable. There must be price disruption here. Are you, in effect, expanding the opportunity for creativity and then simultaneously potentially reducing the price point and creating greater access?
Yeah, so Scott, what's interesting is, and yes, you are quite fashionable. I should have put my blue shirt on.
And my daughters are listening, so please help me.
Okay. So, Joe, you said to make it casual, so here we are. So
I'm not even in a polo shirt. This is a blank generic shirt. But go ahead.
There we go. So actually, Scott, we're not looking necessarily to say, because look, the apparel industry has been in a deflationary period since I believe it's 1972 or 4. I'd have to go back and check that fact, right? Literally a deflationary period. The model's not about price, right? The brands set the price. We don't set the price. We tell them, here's what the model is, here's what the subscription is, if you will, here's what we can produce this for. And we're actually trying to drive a higher AUR, an average unit retail, not a lower AUR. We're not trying to actually lower the price of the product, Scott, because look, I'm not trying to get any misnomer. You can't make a product in the United States of America cheaper than you can make it in a Southeast Asia country. You can't. The difference you have to look at is the total cost of ownership. And if your daughter, Scott's listening, she's going to know where it was made, who made it, that it was made in a plant, right, that is completely sustainable, right? Those things are very important to that generation. And look, people pay for that. Not everybody pays for it, right? The Patagonia customer pays for it, right? We're not trying to target 100% of any brand's customer or 100% of any customer at all. We think that there are certain generations and ones to follow, right? That this consumer centricity is willing to pay a bit more for it if they're part of the process, if it's more sustainable, if they get what they want, and man, if they get it fast. We all know how fast this consumer wants it.
I want to follow up on Scott's question as well, because somebody in the chat mentioned, if you could put up Gail's comment. Scott mentioned, are you lowering price? But the other question is, are your consortium members willing to go down to such low levels of volume? Is there a minimum order size that you need?
Yes, there is. One unit.
One.
I love it.
A unit of 1 could be an order size? I could have
through a business-to-business model. If you are on a website and of a business or whatnot, and you go through to order a unit of 1, our platform will enable us to serve that brand and that consumer through that brand at a unit of 1.
And I assume in the end of the day, I won't know who DXM is. I've never heard of it.
Nope, you will not know who DXM is. We will sit, now all your interaction, all your payment and everything will be with the brand, will sit underneath that brand. Does anyone know who Amazon Web Services is when you're on this video right now? Because there's one of 3 companies that are probably hosting everything right now, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. Netflix is Amazon Web Services. It's just
right.
Exactly. Yep. That's
Well,
good.
We're going to find a place for you in Northeast Pennsylvania. We need this company here. You know, the thing that we haven't talked about that much, but again, back to what you're enabling, is it seems as if you're going to also accelerate opportunities for creativity, and you're going to expand potentially the fashion industry, because companies won't have the same error risk, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be able to explore and, in fact, tap into the minds of more designers than they do now under their brand umbrellas.
Yeah, so I think that whole test that learn piece has been, I think most brands, and in my experience in the industry, are pretty siloed to what they know, right? I think, again, designers do a great job going out and trying to collect all the information they can from a lot of different sources, whether it be a subway sign or travel to Europe or Asia or books or runway shows or whatever it is, right? But I think technology today just moves so fast. You can learn everything right from the palm of your hand if you wanted to. I mean, if you decided to, you could learn exactly what's going on in the world during the 44 minutes and 20 seconds we've been on here, or less. So I do think that is right, Scott.
Matthew, thank you, because you actually led to the name of the show, the Agile Dashboard. That's our whole idea, is how do you keep up with all these future changes? So how are you keeping up with the future changes? How did you stumble across this? How do you stay relevant? How do you figure out what's next?
So look, I'll have to tell you that it's not easy. One of the ways that we did it from a leadership standpoint is, and look, I was taught this, and a lot of credit to some previous bosses, right? Failure is a good thing. If you're not failing, you're not moving forward. Now, you can't fail to the degree where you put everything out, right? But you should leapfrog wherever you were going to go if you would have been successful if you fail, right? And that's a very important quality that we're trying to employ. The other thing is we've leveraged some of the partners, right? And again, I'm not going to call out names, but specifically a Silicon Valley partner that's out there who's in the business of basically disrupting corporations by connecting them with startups, if you will. And what I've done is, I can tell you over the last several years, I've met with over 300 startups. Of course, been on video with them or whatnot, because the last period of 6 months has been difficult. And you learn so much about what their thoughts are, right, out of Berkeley or Stanford or anywhere, right, out of their garage, what their new ideas are to disrupt the industry. And disrupt not just this industry, but other industries, whether it be autonomous vehicles or whatnot. It's just so interesting, the thought process. And because, again, of this ecosystem consortium, and you have all these organizations that are connected to us, we're able to learn, because it's just that thing. If we're connected to 15 or 20 companies and they're connected to 15 or 20 companies and so on and so on and so on, we're all continuing, right, to learn what's going out there. So look, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth. Try and listen at least twice as much as we talk.
Yeah, dynamite.
No, that's absolutely sage advice. By the way, I see a couple more questions in the chat that might be addressed here. So one of them is Jeffrey Schechter said, what's your feeling about customization, personalization made in the on-demand model? And I want to tie it to another question by, is it Tokazil Mara? I know I'm mispronouncing this name, but basically said, can't these efficiencies be eventually passed on to customers?
So I do think at some point, by the way, the efficiencies do get passed on. I don't think, in one of the slides it's shown, right, we're just not there on the technology part yet. We're not there on the advanced manufacturing part, if you will. I do think you roll forward 3 to 5 years, we're in a whole different state from a technology and advanced manufacturing side. And answering Jeffrey's question, and thank you both for them. Yeah, Jeffrey, I really believe that the on-demand customization and personalization just will continue to grow more and more. over the coming days, weeks, months, and years. It's not going away. And look, something will shift it, right? As the world always shifts, right? But I don't see in the foreseeable future, I just see growth there right now. And we'll have to pivot when it shifts. But right now, we believe it's going to grow.
So, and unfortunately, our time is coming to an end, but I want, because I know not everybody in this call is in the retail business. Can you answer Madeline Wallace's question? Was asked in the chat as a final question, which says, is this applicable to other industries, or is this just something that's more retail specific?
So I actually think it's the other way around. Thank you for the question. I actually think that we're taking from other industries, right? We're learning from aerospace. We're learning from auto. We're learning for semiconductor, because they've actually gone into some of these models already of customization, like I said, in the car industry. Do I think it's applicable specifically to other industries? I actually do. So I think that you can expand this, certainly, and you see it's already been done in the footwear, the accessory space. It's not just apparel. So I do think that those two are areas in which we could see continued growth in, or certainly starts. You certainly see personalization, if you will, when a woman or a gentleman would buy a bag or whatnot, initials and whatnot, and designs, for sure. I think it can go further though, for sure. Right? How does it? Was it really fit my shoulder, that bag, the right way, or am I shorter or longer arms or whatnot? Why can't that strap be adjusted? And I know people say, oh, you can adjust your strap, but not every bag you can.
Well, Matthew, our time is actually quickly coming to an end. I really appreciate, more than anything else, you're willing to be transparent. I know that you're on your 5th or 6th iteration of what DXM is, and the amount of willingness to try things out and experiment and share that with us, I think is so valuable. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your experience. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I'd like to just thank Duke Corporate Education. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Joe. And look, this has been a group effort. This has been a consortium effort. It's not me. I'm just on the video today talking about it. Couldn't even be close to be doing this without all the other great people that have worked out tirelessly over the last years to try and get us to just where we're at. And we have such a long way to go, Joe.
Well, regardless, I think we're all going to benefit from it, and I can't wait to see where you go from here. So if anybody wants to connect more with Matthew, I know that DXM is actually just launching. This is actually one of his first public appearances. Feel free to connect with us at dukece.com. We're more than happy to connect you with information about this show and some of our other things that we do at Duke. Happy to continue that conversation. I want to thank Scott and Vishal for taking their time to be here as well. And thank you for listening. You make this broadcast better by asking the great questions you do. So until next time, as I like to say, you can't drive a car looking at the rearview mirror. We are out. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.